Hello and welcome to the Food for Data interview series. In today's mini interview, we'll be sitting down with James, who is the Managing Director of Proof Insight, part of the C&C Group, where I'll be chatting through the launch of Proof Analytics and how the transformation has been from the challenges to the benefits and what's needed in a business to really make this work. So welcome to the series, James.
Hi, Natalia. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
No, it's great to have you. So could we set the scene for our audience today, give them a bit of an insight about yourself and how you got into the position that you are in?
Absolutely. A bit of background on me. So for the past 13 years, I've worked in insights, data and analytics. For the past 3.5, I've done this as Managing Director of Proof Insights, which is a company we created as part of the C&C Group of companies. Proof Insight builds information assets for C&C, which underpin the group's sales and consumer targeting strategy, and also C&C's collaborations with their supply base. In terms of how I got into data analytics, etc., my journey into data analytics and insight feels unconventional. But then when I think about the context of my journey, I graduated I graduated 8 years before the launch of the iPhone. When I went to university, Google as a business didn't exist. So it was natural, I think, that I was going to be, there were a whole raft of different opportunities that came to pass whilst I was at university. I was born analog. But the mainstream digital revolution started during my most formative years. So the rapid acceleration of technology whilst I was in my teenage years and in my early 20s transformed really what I thought was possible from a career perspective. So I studied philosophy originally, which was a pretty varied course. But looking back, I think that's where my fascination with the logic that drives analytics comes from. And I also learned about the psychological and sociological influences on people that ultimately drive a lot of business decisions. That led for me to a particular interest in demographics, social data, and in particular the work of Geert Hofstede, the Dutch sociologist who looked at cultural differences and the importance of understanding people when it comes to growing a business. I mean, fundamentally, at its heart, every single job I've had within the data and analytics space has always been about people. I absolutely love people. I love trying to understand patterns in behaviour. I love understanding more about people so that I can help people find the right products in the right place so they can get the best service. I really love understanding people so that I can work better with them, so that I can better relate and support my team. And also understand the billions of people that I've never even met. So, I mean, the rise in understanding people and behaviours, that's been the driving force of my last decade in work. I think it was the growth of data, particularly on people, that drew me into developing a career in research and data and insight. And then as data sets started to become larger, as we could get involved in big data, as we could start to build our own first-party data sets, whilst also bringing in third-party data sets and then build the trust of other companies so that we could become custodians of second-party data, as well as with the rise of open source. All of that data and the democratization of technology, it grew the role into enterprise-level business intelligence, and latterly into the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence in analytics. And I think the democratization of technology, particularly over the last 10 years, has really started to transform multiple business sectors. Added to all of that, very important to say, I've had a lot of luck. I think that I've been extremely fortunate to grow up in the time that I have. People my parents' age were the ones who were driving forward the rapid technological advancements of the late 70s and into the early 80s. People kind of 5 to 10 years older than I am have been driving the technology democratization of the past decade. And now I'm incredibly grateful that camera phones didn't exist whilst I was a teenager and a student during the 90s. But I also feel that I've been really, really lucky to be in the right place at the right time to grow with the technology that's driving business forward today.
Definitely. Well, thank you for that introduction. Now, I know we've had a few discussions around what Proof have been up to and the building of the data monetization platform. And it all sounds like a very exciting time. So it'd be really interesting to kind of give our audience an insight into what this platform is and why it's actually being created.
Absolutely. I mean, at its simplest, Proof Analytics is just a web-based data visualization platform. Of course, I'm going to say it's more than that, but as its simplest, just to visualize it, that's what it is. It's a web-based data visualization platform. It also uses predictive modeling, using some machine learning and some AI to identify business opportunities. And it is very exciting to have built and delivered it. And from a C&C perspective, it's going to become a force multiplier for the sales and revenue growth with our partners. Now, the reason that we created Proof Analytics is to give C&C Group suppliers a way to access and interrogate their own brand sales data. So we did this to help the relationships between C&C Group and its supply base. We wanted them to transform from simply transactional relationships to much more collaborative, using data as the catalyst. Now with both parties able to pore over exactly the same data, interrogate exactly the same information, and they've got the same insight, rather than doing what sometimes happen where you'd spend most of the meeting arguing whose spreadsheet was right. Now you can talk over exactly the same information. Everyone can get straight down to business, and they can leave each meeting clear on who is doing what, to grow sales, which is tremendously mutually beneficial. Now, we are helping to fundamentally step change that supplier-buyer conversation into genuinely transformative growth discussions. Now, Proof Analytics serves two sets of people. It serves internally, the C&C Group, and also these external users that I've articulated, the suppliers, now each of whom have unique visualizations, they've got unique access parameters, and of course they've each got their own individual analytical requirements. Now the platform is simultaneously able to cater for thousands of users consuming both basic data at a high level, whilst allowing more in-depth users to explore further, manipulating millions of rows worth of data, and it can be used to inform both short-term tactics and also long-term strategy. Now, the platform's most basic users will log onto the platform, and they will see their aggregated total sales volumes across different market segments. The platform's most in-depth internal users will be able to see the fully disaggregated data down to individual customer and site level. They'll have the ability also to interrogate product and site level performance using built-in ML and AI models. And what this enables the advanced users to do is to predict future product or customer performance. And then it also allows the internal users to trigger an appropriate behavior. So whether that be a form of customer contact, whether it be an offer or a call or a visit. And also in all of that, that behavior that's then triggered, the actions after that behavior has been triggered can be used to inform future forecasts. So this helps C&C maximize the opportunity from each product to retain as many customers as possible, and ultimately to reward positive customer behavior. It is, as you've said, it's really exciting to have built it. And we're really positive that it's going to be a force multiplier, as I say, for sales and revenue growth in partnership with our supply base.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose what steps, when this was happening, what steps were taken to create a dedicated team for solving the data-related business challenges and the building of this platform?
Putting a dedicated team in place was absolutely key to the success of this, and navigating the challenges around that, the business challenges, and the building of the platform were were the hard bit in terms of it took the most time in planning. Now, I find across the businesses that I've worked in, it's often the same number of small people, a small group of people, are the same people are drawn into every major task that business has. Oh, we must get John on this. We must get Jane on this. We must bring them in together. And it consumes so much of those individual people's time. It can lead to these people being spread too thinly. It can lead to their frustration and often to the burnout of your best people because you're asking too much of a small call. Now, my senior colleagues also recognised this and agreed that if we were to make genuinely transformational progress, then we needed to do something different. Now, ultimately, you can't deliver transformational change on the side of the desk. And it's very, very important to recognise that you can't deliver transformational change by simply doing what you've always done. So we created a dedicated team under the Proof Insight banner. Now, it wasn't all plain sailing. Different leaders within a business want to make their own mark and need to be newly convinced of the value of any project that you're undertaking. So having worked with 5 different CEOs over the last 7 years, 3 different CEOs over the last 3, we've had to pivot a few times during the planning phase. We've also had to navigate the pandemic, which was a challenge to many, many businesses. And we had a couple of false starts during that period. But once it all came together, purely in terms of building and deploying our own platform, we were able to execute it all within around 12 months. In terms of the process itself that we adopted, I'd probably break it into 3 parts. Now, I think that the first, most importantly, you have to build consensus. You have to get people behind what you're doing and sell the dream. You also need to create, I think, a long-term vision allied to a short-term mission, and what we built into the project were proof points along the way to be able to demonstrate the ROI on the project. Yeah. And thirdly, and I think most importantly of all, you have to surround yourself with the right people, and ultimately, to my mind, that's people who get things done. So if we just go through those: building consensus, creating the vision and the mission with the proof points, and then 3, recruiting the right team. You go through those different aspects. I think, in terms of building the consensus right at the beginning, to start with, we had to gain business sponsorship. I think implicit in gaining that business sponsorship is gaining the trust of the CEO and the CFO. And as part of that, to build that trust, you have to understand their needs, their motivations, and the business's goals at which they operate. Now, these goals will differ depending on your company structure. At a high level, if you're working in a limited or private company, there is often one person or a small cohort of people who are the decision makers within that limited or private company. You need to convince them of what it is that you're doing in order to get your business sponsorship. That can, in some cases, in limited companies, can be driven by 1 or 2 personalities. And once you've engaged and understood their needs and their requirements, then you can be on your way to delivering your project. In terms of a larger company or a PLC, there are multiple different people that you need to convince along the way. So you have the CEO, you have to convince the CFO, and of course the board, because the owners of the business are the banks and shareholders, and the board and the CEO and the CFO are the custodians of the promises made to the banks and the shareholders. So you have to make sure that you understand the unique business requirements of the business that you're operating in a PLC world, in a world where CEO remuneration is often linked to share price performance. Then there can be factors completely beyond the control of you or your project that you're going to need to be flexible to operate around. So you have to be patient, you have to be flexible, and when an opportunity arises, you need to move quickly. Yeah. Sometimes in terms of building consensus, it can be sometimes difficult to achieve. You need to have, in my experience, it takes a real visionary leader of an organization to be able to see the opportunity for investing in data and analytics. And you also need someone who's got the requisite stamina to be able to support you to deliver the project over an extended period of time. You do not always find those qualities in one person. I've been very lucky with the people that I've worked with. It can be from businesses I have spoken to. It can be easy to find a CFO or a CEO or a board who are very, very interested in the outcomes of data analytics today, but who are less interested in investing for the answers tomorrow or in a year, 2 years, 3 years' time. It's much harder to find those people who are willing to invest both their time and money to get those answers in the future. Fortunately for me, over the past decade, I've worked with some very supportive and inspiring leadership. And key to gaining the business sponsorship at the outset for the Proof Analytics platform was identifying a potential addressable market for data monetization in the industry in which we operate. So quantifying what we would refer to as the value at stake for the business. If you cannot demonstrate long-term incremental ROI, return on investment, and then you're going to go nowhere. And I've seen a number of 3-year plans over the years where all of the growth is in year 3, which is just not acceptable. You have to be able to prove that you can deliver return on investment within 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months of your project starting. And that comes to the proof points piece of the planning stage. So in terms of sizing the addressable market, it can be an inexact science, as data and information carry different values in different industries. And not every organization is the same or has access to the same information. So we used a combination of factors. We spoke to experts who had budgetary responsibility and understood what they were willing to spend on different areas of their data acquisition and market understanding. We also spoke to data sales experts from multiple different industries to start to understand how they go about monetizing data in their world. And that helped us build up a sense of the value that we might be able to unlock by growing in this space. We also talked from a collaborative point of view with the supplier base, trying to understand what their needs were, what they fundamentally needed to get out of the information so that this collaboration could really blossom and grow. So having identified the addressable market and the profit pools that we were seeking to unlock, we then went out about building our business case and our delivery plan. So that's the second part of what we had to do. Mm-hmm. So creating a long-term vision allied to a short-term mission. So conscious of the challenges we wanted to tackle. So when we started, we kind of started at the end and worked backwards. So Jeff Bezos, when he was running Amazon, is famous on his podcasts and speeches for talking about how he would start with a press release. What is the press release that you want to write at the end of this? What are you going to have accomplished? So we started from the end and worked backwards because we felt that was the best way of us maintaining a strong single vision on our end goal. And our end goal was controlling and owning our own analytics and data visualization solution, so that was something that would empower both CNC and her partners. But when we started, there was a rapid democratization of technology. Data visualization platforms were becoming cheaper and easier to use, and we didn't want to commit straight away when we were looking at this back in 2018, 2019 to one partner or an expensive solution that would render itself or be rendered obsolete quite quickly. Equally, we couldn't wait to scale what we were doing in terms of delivering revenue from our data, because that was our first proof point. So we built a 60-month roadmap with a focus on the first 36 months, within which we included a number of key success landmarks during the first 6 months so that we could show ROI as soon as we possibly could. And then by aligning our long-term vision with the short-term mission, so the long-term vision, which for us was monetizing and commercializing data through our own platform, the short-term mission in this case, increasing data quality and beginning to grow revenue through the data platform, and then these near-term proof points that I'll come to, we were able to build consensus quite quickly and get the support that we needed for the long-term investment required to deliver on the long-term goal. So I think it's important to note there that we didn't get all of the money and the sponsorship that we were hoping for from day one. It was about creating this plan and this vision. The final part, for me, the most important part, is the the people approach that you take, surrounding yourself with the right people. Now, in terms of the business case, when you're building your business case, you need to decide which of 3 approaches you're going to take at a very high level. Are you going to deliver it entirely in-house? Are you going to deliver it exclusively through third-party contract, or are you going to deliver it in a hybrid way? In my experience, doing all of this in-house is much, much harder than you think, especially trying to find the right people. Now, sadly, there are lots of what I would call cowboys. I don't want to be disparaging to anyone who is an actual cowboy, but in terms of the slang terms, lots of cowboys in the data analytics space. As the saying goes, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And I have seen, as it's an area where there's been rapid growth and investment amounts are pretty high, and the baseline level of stakeholder knowledge is pretty low, I think it's not surprising that unscrupulous people have targeted the space to try and take advantage. And I think it's pretty easy to build an impressive looking CV using the internet. It's much harder to tell whether somebody has got the skills to back up what they say they can do or what their CV says they can do when you're talking to them. I mean, I've found some recruiters unable to distinguish whether the people that they're putting forward can actually use the technology they say they can use. And I've personally been burnt by that in the past. It can be a bit of a minefield. Now, equally, we didn't want to go down the all third-party route, because if you go down the all third-party route, you're essentially sort of outsourcing everything to do with, in this case, a major point of difference. We chose to go down the hybrid route because we didn't want to outsource that point of difference, and we wanted our own people to be able to manage the solution once it was complete. And to do that, we also wanted to work with a trusted partner who could not only upskill our team as they were developing and growing, but also a trusted partner that we could use to scale up our team as we needed to through the project, without taking on too much permanent overhead. So in terms of finding the right people for the team, I'm very fortunate to have had a core group of people with me every step of the way over the past 5 years and longer, whose skills have developed with the technology, and they're also people that I trust implicitly, and I ultimately hired them because of their intellectual rigor, their emotional stamina in order to be able to deliver a project like this, and their tenacity, because that I cannot overstate how important tenacity is. Often within my team and within the wider business, if we're speaking to somebody who can't answer a question for us, it's the phrase we use is, if not you, then who? I have to be able to get to the answer. I have to be able to make something happen. And it's important to surround yourself with people who will keep going in order to find that answer. So I think it's incredibly important to surround yourself with people who have the requisite technological and emotional skill set to be able to navigate those types of conversations, and to be able to deliver the project, because it's going to take a long time. You're going to need tenacity and you're going to need drive in order to be able to get there. To supplement your core team, I think it's also very, very important to select the right technology partner. I think large in-house IT teams can be very expensive, can be very, very cumbersome, and a business as a whole can become a bit of a hostage to an enormous sunk cost. And I've seen organizations where IT departments can wield extraordinary levels of control over the enterprise, and rather, in some instances, than being an enabler, you end up in a situation whereby they're controlling and restricting some of the frontline innovation that's required. I know that's not always the case, and I'm not seeking battles with my IT brothers and sisters, but I have seen the case where that can become slightly restrictive. So I much prefer a hybrid approach. Having a strong core of talent that who can within your own business, and a third party that you can use to scale up and down during projects. And once you have delivered the project and gone live, you can start to scale down that resource and use your own people to manage it on an ongoing basis. Yeah,
definitely. And I suppose you've mentioned as well that there were, I think before, around the short-term proof points. What were these exactly, and how were they aligned with the long-term vision for the for Proof in the day?
Well, what it had to be aligned with the long-term goals for the C&C group and the supply base, and they're essentially individual, internal focused information assets that generated immediate ROI. So we built a site targeting tool, we built a promotion targeting tool, and we delivered a predictive churn model. Additionally, we've also, the ancillary benefit of doing all of this, well, it's actually not an ancillary benefit, it's a core benefit, but one of the major benefits was being able to enhance internal reporting at the same time. So site targeting tool, promotion targeting tool, predictive churn model, and enhanced internal reporting. So the key thing from my perspective with the proof points, and I've not called them proof points because the business is proof, it sounds extraordinarily trite, it's just proving what you can do.
Yeah.
They were important to the plan, but the points themselves weren't predefined at the outset of the plan. They evolved through stakeholder conversations and engagement. So, whilst we wanted to build a platform that helped C&C both commercialize and monetize the information assets that we built using its data, we also wanted to help C&C to ensure it could answer the fundamental business questions that were core to its success. So through conversations with senior stakeholders and breaking down these core business questions, we were able to look at, okay, these are the core business questions you want to answer. These are the core data points, statistics, KPIs, and break those down into their component parts and get to the heart of the data points that were driving the business forward. So this helped us put together a suite of internal reports. And it also allowed us to highlight true business performance for internal stakeholders whilst we were developing the external platform. So the act of building the platform led us, Proof, to restructure the C&C data that was coming into us. So we created our own environment where this data was coming in. As I say, dedicated team to doing this. The dedicated team came with dedicated systems and space from a data warehouse, data lake perspective, and dedicated tools, dedicated people. So we had the ability to take the data that was coming into us, the C&C data that was coming in, and create a single codified approach to classifying all products, all customers, all outlets, all of the information that was coming in across Great Britain and Ireland. Yeah. And this single approach had assimilated data from multiple ERPs, and allowed us to integrate that data that we'd codified, also integrate it with key open source and third-party data. So we were able to bring in things like Google Places, Google Maps, different geography data, different ONS data sets, etc. And this gave us a unique connected view of the underlying data, which also allowed us to build, as well as the core reporting internally, also allowed us to build these ancillary tools. So the first one was a predictive churn model. So using some ML and some AI allowed us to monitor customer purchasing behavior over a sustained period of time. And we were able to map the similarities in that behavior between customers who'd stopped ordering together and stopped ordering altogether, and then map the behaviors of existing customers to see whether they were following a similar pattern, and those that were following the same patterns, either at a whole site level or down to individual product level, we could then trigger an intervention. So either with an e-commerce offer or some form of salesperson interaction with that customer. Linking the open source data and the Google Places data to our core codified outlet universe, which included all existing customers and all prospects, led us to the second proof point. Now, the second proof point was looking at commonalities in terms of the outlet type, commonalities between existing customers and non-customers. So that will enable us to create a site targeting or sort of prospecting module, which then was able to underpin some brand sales and product sales and e-commerce drives. So that was a key proof point as well. And ultimately, the incremental revenues from these initiatives were able to build the confidence in the overall plan and let the business know that everything that we were doing was on the right track.
Yeah, makes sense. And I suppose having the business is key for the whole business on board. This is key for this to work. So what challenges did you face, and how did the company address these and work through them to get where you are today?
I think the primary challenges were around data ownership, the structure of the company, and then some of the people and processes. So kind of data ownership, company structure, and people and processes. So data ownership is an interesting one, in that, you can't have accurate reporting without the right data structures in place. Everything sits on the data. There's no point having, in any business, a reporting work stream if you haven't already had the data work stream and everybody understands the data that drives that reporting. So you have to have the right structures in place. And I've spoken to many companies who haven't had the right data structure in place. In fact, they haven't even got an inventory of all the data that they have in place. They've got complete inventories of how many chairs and mirrors and toilets that they have, but they don't have a complete inventory of all of the different data sets or potential information assets that they could have across the organization. So having a clear log of all of that data and the important underlying data that drives the answers to the fundamental business questions is a key part of this. And you need to understand where it enters the business and who is responsible for ensuring that data is correct, and have an appropriate master data management structure and plan in place. So for proof analytics, we brought the data from multiple sources, multiple teams, multiple owners across the group, and created one single version of the truth that then drove the analytics platform and drives the internal reporting. Now, that sort of brings us on to some of the structure, the kind of company structure piece. Getting everybody aligned behind a common goal is always one of the key challenges of any project. And that is, whilst we work in a business, it's fundamentally people-based. It's about understanding the individual people involved. Now, the challenges can become greater in aligning people behind one goal when the nuances of structure or territory are involved. Now, often strong feelings can be a barrier to progress. By this, I mean kind of negative personal feelings around kind of a perceived encroachment into a space of ownership that an individual has. Now, those feelings of individuals are often really, really understandable. I mean, frequently, actually, we actively encourage people to have those feelings. You want people to care about the roles, you want people to care about their jobs, you want people to understand, know their responsibilities, and take those responsibilities seriously. So, many people operate much, much better if you have clear boundaries and clear expectations. This is especially true in more science-based roles within the enterprise, roles like finance, roles such as IT. So the flip side of that ownership and control is that it can be hard to navigate in a project if you're taking on taking a project that crosses departmental borders and the land's not been prepared. So that can be a challenge. You can face into these perfectly natural human emotions. They can manifest themselves in some defensive conversations with colleagues who feel things are being taken away from them, and that can be very difficult for them and for the project. This gets even more challenging if you're working across multiple layers of stakeholders across multiple different companies within an enterprise, especially if your enterprise has grown rapidly in an inorganic way, through the acquisition of different companies. Then you've got more stakeholders and more people to navigate. Now, we sought to address these issues in a couple of ways. Firstly, by working with stakeholders from across the organization in advance, so that people felt informed about what we were going to be doing and understood what was happening. I think the key thing there is that this helped people feel the change was happening with them rather than to them. And I think that's an important part of driving that engagement early on. Secondly, we set up a team that was solely responsible for organising the data that we were going to commercialise. So again, that dedicated team that I've talked about before. We made the lines of responsibility and ownership really, really clear to everyone. This team owns this information. And we didn't just make it exclusive. We made sure that once all of the information had been codified and assimilated into one area, that we could then allow each other department access to get a route in to that clean single version of the truth data. So people understood what was going on beforehand. They understood what we were doing and why, and they weren't cut off from getting their own data.
No, it's been great to get a bit of an insight into what Proof have been going through at the minute. It's a very exciting time. So I suppose that comes to my last question. So with this new platform in place, what does the future look like for Proof, and how will you guys benefit from this going forward?
Well, I think it's really exciting. I think the future for Proof is very, very bright indeed, and and the same for CNC using the data. I mean, during our fast start phase, we've gone from essentially sending data in spreadsheets to around sort of 35 suppliers to over 80 of the world's largest brand owners using and interacting with the platform. And they're now using it to drive their day-to-day business activity. And we have a clear pathway to being able to onboard many, many more suppliers. CNC Group has well over 300 suppliers, and there's an opportunity to onboard the majority of them over the course of the next 12 to 18 months, which is absolutely fantastic. As well as helping to facilitate richer conversations with brand owners, Proof Analytics is empowering the brand owners to take the action to grow their own sales by understanding where they're winning and with whom. This enables CNC to grow the use of the platform through collaboration with both suppliers and buyers. They're working together to drive that sales growth rather than simply getting a supplier to buy a report. You're actually working with that supplier on the same information so that you can drive the business forward. The ability to sort of commercialize these information assets is really, really key for the growth of Proof Analytics, and also the key for other information assets that Proof build for CNC, and any information assets that any of the viewers might be looking at building in their own businesses. Commercialization, I think, is key and distinct from simply monetizing the data. And I think that's where the key growth opportunity lies, because when you monetize data and you stick a pound sign next to it, you sell it for money, that money goes into your P&L, you pay tax on that in the same way that you would pay tax on any of the balance sheet items. Whereas if you create an information asset, and the exchange of that information asset, it's a non-balance sheet item. You can trade that for commercial benefits that don't have to be declared or taxed. You can trade that for pennies off a product or for any kind of collaborative advantage. The building and leveraging of information for a lot of businesses is a huge opportunity, and it's an opportunity for material, incremental, marginal gain for lots and lots of businesses. So it's an exciting opportunity for anybody working in data. And then, look, finally, in terms of building this ourselves, when you let a third party act as the gatekeeper to your own business, then you are limiting your ability to maximize any opportunity. So through Proof Analytics, as well as CNC having richer conversations with suppliers, Proof Insight now has a direct route into the key decision makers within some of the biggest brand owners operating in Great Britain and Ireland. And this will allow Proof Insight to showcase all of the products and skills and capabilities that the team have to grow the type of work that Proof do, the type of services that Proof provide, and the type of products and information assets that Proof deliver. So all in all, I'd say it's a very exciting time indeed. Indeed.
Well, thank you, James, for joining us today on the Food for Data series. It's been great having you with us.
Thank you, Natalia. It's been absolutely brilliant to talk to you.
Thank you.